every weeknight at 6, right here on WOCA, The Source.
Visit the WOCA website at www.woca.com. Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA. Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. Did any of you happen to see this story about comedian, TV personality Stephen Colbert, who is going to take over David Letterman's spot when David Letterman retires? I think that's later this month. But anyway, he's in the news today because he announced yesterday that he would fund all grant requests from South Carolina on the crowdfunding site DonorsChoose.org, worth $800,000. And this is for teachers, so that when teachers, one of the things that always drives me nuts is when you hear about the fact that this salary and that salary from our government officials, and then there's not enough money for teachers to be able to buy pencils for their classrooms. So he's going to honor every one of the teachers' requests on that one site, up to $800,000. That's an amazing offer. Another thing that I wanted to say as a way to introduce our next guest, and that first thing was part of that, is that whenever we talk about education, and if you're critical of education, what always comes to mind for me is that we hire our legislators to make decisions, and then they act like the boss and mandate the things that we need to do. And where it really applies to teachers is sometimes counterintuitive. I mean, the teachers should really be the ones who figure out what's the best way to teach, not the legislators who may or may not have ever been a teacher. I'm guessing most legislators have never been a teacher. So Harry C. Boyte is on the phone. He has a book called Democracy's Education. He is a senior scholar in public work philosophy at the Sabo Center for Democracy and Citizenship at Augsburg College. He's the visiting professor at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University in South Africa. He's a senior fellow at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, a contributor to the Huffington Post, the New York Times, the Chronicle of Higher Education, Political Theory, CBS This Morning, CBS Evening News, NPR, and now it's an honor to say he's on our little show, AM Ocala Live. And we are talking about the book, which has essays from leading university presidents, policymakers, et cetera, even students, that apparently gives an idea of how educators can be the ones who make the changes. And I love that. If I'm understanding it right, I love it. Harry Boyte. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Larry. It's good to be on your show.
And thank you for waiting. It was kind of a long and maybe somewhat awkward intro, but I just think that we have dropped the ball when it comes to teaching, whether it's at the grade level or the college level.
No, I think that's right. And so this book is a sign of change, positive change.
It sounds like hope. It sounds hopeful to me.
It's practical. It's full of stories. It's hopeful. I would say it's really about, in a deep way, the reclaiming of the identity of educators as citizens. So thinking beyond simply their discipline or their field to be change agents and constructive change agents in K-12 and higher education.
So if we look at other countries, are we not doing as well? And I'm asking that with sort of an understanding that we are not doing as well, and only because, and I don't know if I'm listening to fact or opinion, to be honest. But what is your thought on that? Do you think we could do better, and are other countries doing better than us?
Well, depends how you define better.
Okay.
I mean, interestingly, as you were saying, teachers often feel pretty powerless these days, like outside forces are trying to dictate what they teach. The highest achieving schools in terms of tests are in places like Finland, where actually teachers have a lot of power and authority, and they don't actually find out the scores of their students in tests. But if you aggregate their tests, so that shows that actually the question of teachers and I would say communities having more power is really central. Of course, it's an old American tradition. We've just gotten away from it.
Well, and that's the way I felt too. That we used to do it right, and somehow we're doing it wrong. And just my humble opinion, and I've expressed it already, is that our legislators somehow felt that they're the ones who need to dictate what's being taught, how it's being taught, et cetera, and they've never taught.
I mean, this is a problem that shows, you know, you can see it in different areas, that power has tended to be more and more centralized, and outside forces think they can dictate what happens in a school or a health clinic or whatever.
So tell me about the people who contributed to the book. How did you find them? Were you surprised at what they wrote? Was there anybody left out that you just didn't have room for, that you wish could be in there? Maybe there's
we had to make some hard choices.
Yeah.
But it comes out of a coalition we had in 2012 called the American Commonwealth Partnership of about 600 or 700 colleges and universities. Basically, all schools which are trying to say education is more than a private benefit. It's more than just education for your own individual success. We need to recover the idea that education has benefit to society. And if you think about it, that's actually eroded a lot. We tend to think, and colleges often just advertise themselves. If you go here, this is how much more money you're going to make. So the ways that colleges can make a contribution to communities has been lost. And I would say, along with that, even the very purpose of higher education is not talked about much.
That's interesting. You mean the bigger picture as opposed to the job you can get?
Yeah, I mean, so we had one connected to this book. We had a discussion all across America on the purpose of higher education. And what was really striking was that again and again we heard, and this was, thousands of people would say, boy, this is a really important conversation. We've just never had it before. I had one legislator in Minnesota, a minority leader in the Senate, who said, this is a great question. What is the purpose of higher education? He said, in all the years I've been in the state Senate, I don't think I've ever heard that question asked.
The diversity of education is most welcome. We just had a professional who lives and works in our community on the air right before you, and he volunteers giving his expertise to the students that are high school age going to the a technical institute here in our community.
Yeah.
Some people go to school to go to college to reach those degrees that way, and other people go to school to reach degrees in the hands-on field. And he said it is just amazing the skills that the students come out of there with at the different various schools.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Robin. I mean, the genius of American higher education has been its diversity. And that's closely tied to the larger democratic purposes of higher education. I mean, in 1947, the Commission on Higher Education appointed by President Truman said, the basic purpose of higher education is to contribute to a democratic society. And democracy was defined as a society, a way of life, not simply elections. And that involves, in fact, that commission led to the great expansion of community colleges and the GI Bill, which, of course, increased access for all sorts of returning veterans, millions of returning veterans. And
wow. So as we read the book, if I'm not an educator, but I'm a voter. So I'm guessing that as I read the opinions of people who are educators and students and faculty members, and it says policymakers as well, so I'm assuming there are some legislative people in there.
Yeah, there was, absolutely.
So as I read this book, and I'm maybe changing my view a little bit about who I should vote for based on what I'm reading. Is that possible?
Well, I think so. I think we should ask all politicians of whatever party, what is the bigger picture? And, how are we going to revitalize a good society? So one of the key messages I would say in this book is education is not simply for today's jobs, it's actually for life. And how do we for one thing, all the focus on educating for the immediate jobs overlooks the fact that jobs are going to be different in 20 years. And more broadly, what kind of jobs? And do they make a contribution? Are they jobs that are actually not socially useful? And so there are a lot of stories in the book about how in some places, colleges are preparing students to be change agents and innovators and citizen contributors. So we have a very good story of and this is at Augsburg actually, of the special education program. Special education are the kids who are labeled and seen as troublemakers or emotionally and behaviorally disabled all across the country. But the system doesn't work now. It's broken. The kids, actually a huge number, end up in jail because, kids don't want to be fixed. But in the special education program here, there's a whole different approach. There's working with kids in schools so that they can learn how to be change agents themselves, how they can work constructively on issues like bullying or animal cruelty or obesity, and that empowers the littler kids. It changes their self-image, but it also develops a different kind of teacher in special education. So the teachers, in all of the Augsburg candidates, students who are going to be teachers, are seeing themselves as change agents in special education who are going to really create a whole different model and approach.
Wow.
And they're fired up. I mean, they're very...
Well, yeah, I love that, actually. I can actually relate to that. I remember when I was younger, I had a job. I worked for the state, and my job was community youth leader. And the job description was help take troubled youth who are incarcerated and show them a better way so that they won't have to remain incarcerated. Because in the state of Florida,
similar thing.
Yeah. Okay, we need to take a little break. And I guess my point was that when you have your job described to you that way, as opposed to just the rudimentary aspects of your job, then I think you have a better grasp of your mission, I think.
Yeah, you have a bigger purpose.
Wow, I love that. Okay, we'll take a little break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. Partly sunny today, a high of 85 to 89. Tonight will stay mainly clear, a low of 63 to 68. Partly sunny, stays warm tomorrow, a high of 87 to 92. And sunny to partly cloudy, warm for Mother's Day Sunday, high 89 to 93. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Maggie Johnson.
Hi, I'm Seth with AA Lock, Dock, and Security. Have you ever thought about the locks or security on your house or business? Have you ever wondered why the keys to your new car cost so much? Well, at AA Lock, Dock, and Security, we can help with securing your valuables. We can even replace those expensive transponder keys. We can give you the knowledge that no one else will. Call AA Lock, Dock, and Security at 867-1965. That's 867-1965.
Looking for that spot to try some real Cuban food? Head on over to Mama V's Cuban Cafe with home-cooked food just like Abuela used to make it. Mama V's is the #1 authentic Cuban cuisine. Centrally located on Highway 200 in Ocala. Best Cuban sandwich, steak, black beans and rice, and yummy sweet plantains. Tres leche and flan for dessert. Mama V's is open Monday through Friday, 10 to 7, Saturday, 10 to 9. Sandwich combos include side and drink for $7.95. And you've got to try Mama V's Tropical Shakes. 622-1727. Mama V's Cuban Cafe.
All right, 12 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this Friday morning. Nice looking day out there. Harry C. Boyte is on the phone. He's got a book that he is credited as the editor of. It's called Democracy's Education, Public Work, Citizenship, and the Future of Colleges and Universities. And it really, so far, sounds like a great collection of essays by a group of a varied number types of people, like university presidents, it says here, policymakers, faculty, students, community organizers, and what it sounds like they're all trying to express is how to make education better and actually serve the greater good, the bigger picture.
That's right.
Do you know, Harry, what came to mind during the break is the Common Core argument. Now, as a host of a radio show, Robin and I, anything that's debatable will usually find its way here. And when we try to say, well, how do we feel about it? I remember looking at it, and somebody sent us something who was opposed to it. And they sent us an example of a math question, and I said, gosh, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. So right away, I took the bait and went with this thing shouldn't be because it's terrible, based on my stupid opinion, because my opinion was based on one math question that was sent to me.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm not saying I'm for it or against it at this point, because I came to the other conclusion after really thinking about it. Was I was probably, I don't know if I was shown an actual question or if I was an actual question out of context. I don't know. And again, I'm not apologizing for what I said, because what I said I think was true at the time. But I think the better way to look at this is I do a radio show. I don't teach children. So it should be the teachers who look at this and say, is this good or not? And it shouldn't, not only should it not be me, but it shouldn't be the governor.
Well, I think that's right. The politicians should not be in the business of dictating what kids learn.
So if it's right or wrong, that decision should be made by the people you talk to, the people represented in the book.
It should be teachers, educators, and communities, too. And more broadly, I mean, the genius of American education, in addition to its diversity, was that it had a lot of local involvement by communities. In fact, I'm really a Jeffersonian on this point. Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democrat in a small d sense, believed in the people. He said the only safe repositories of the powers of the society are the people. But he wasn't naive, so he said the only way people are going to be wise enough to be self-governing is through education. So there was always a tradition of the common schools and the community colleges and the state colleges and land grants, that the people needed to be involved in education. In fact, the land grant tradition was that the people of a state would own the land grant colleges. So Florida State is a land grant, for example, or Minnesota, University of Minnesota is a land grant. Mm-hmm. So there was a deep sense of popular ownership in education, schools, and higher education. I think we've seen that weaken over time, and that part of the argument of the book is that we really need to return to the notion that everybody is involved in education.
Yeah, and I mean, my notes say the Morrill Act, that's what gave us the land grant colleges?
Yeah, in fact, this book begins with the celebration of the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act, which created the land grant colleges.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that.
We hear scholars from South Africa and Japan that you point out talk about their concerns and wishes. Do you think that it's unfair for the United States government to keep comparing the students in the United States to the students that live overseas, because they always seem to say that the U.S. students are not as smart as the other ones, where we have schools that, children are graduating with high honors, cum laude and everything like that. I just don't understand it.
Well, I think this is a global trend. There's been too much a focus on individual testing. It's a kind of a rat race for hyper competition. I mean, in places like Japan, which we work with, or other countries, the student's whole life can depend on a single test. Mm-hmm. And in the United States, so actually a book to think about in relationship to this book is the new book by David Brooks called The Road to Character. And Brooks, who's a columnist for the New York Times, argues and has stories, but he argues that we've gotten away from a sense of balance, what's really important in life. We've become more of a me society than a we society. And he finds, and we find this too in our work with students across the country, that students are more depressed, they're more anxious, they're more focused on, can I get all the right grades, rather than what does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean to make a public contribution?
Exactly.
Wow.
So I think there's really the hunger in America to get back to the basics.
So the book starts with an essay by yourself, and that's what you were referring to earlier, where you were basically with a question. They say that the best questions are the ones that can make people think of an answer that will change things, and that's what you've done. Yeah,
it's really how can we get an educational system that will help us develop a good society. That's the basic question, and will be education for life, not a narrow focus.
So do you think the culture of a campus has anything to do with this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think and there are stories in the book of campuses which are really breaking with the mold of, kind of hyper competition for the winnowing out the stars. So I would say the genius of American education, it's connected to the diversity, was the idea that a mix of students from very different backgrounds with a challenging environment can produce greatness that a focus on simply the winners, the individuals, can't do. That was the old land-grant tradition, that they're people's colleges.
Wow.
So it was cooperative excellence, not simply individualist, accomplishment.
Okay, I'm going to ask you permission to allow listeners to call in. Are you okay with that?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, let me take a few calls here. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Yes, we were kind of the college that I attended was kind of an exceptional kind of a college. The professors did a lot of things other than their subject of study. My physical chemistry professor also had studied music when he was in college.
That's great.
He played organ at the Episcopal Church every Sunday.
That's great.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. Well, that's kind of insightful. So, do college professors have more freedom than public school teachers?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
But they feel also under the gun. But the part of the problem is that the culture of faculty in colleges has become more detached over the last, I would say, in recent decades. So there's an important study of different disciplines and fields which shows, called American Academic Cultures and Transformation, that shows that the disciplines have become more inward-looking. They talk more to themselves. They become less engaged with the world. So your caller's story of faculty who are multidisciplinary, concerned about different fields, I think there's a desire to get back to that, but that's really been eroded.
Let's take another phone call. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air with Harry Boyte.
Hey, this is Jim. I've missed a couple of programs. My wife's illness. I haven't heard the latest on them, and you might get your cable service up and going. Excuse me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm not really sure what he was saying, Robin.
No.
All right. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. I believe our education system is too many different people putting in too many different kinds of input. And the other fact that the federal government, now we have a Federal Bureau of Education, which basically is adopting Common Core. Excuse me, but I don't think there's very many people in Common Core that were teachers. I think we should be getting back to the 3 R's, basic, simple education, along with penmanship. I understand we're doing away with the longhand penmanship.
I have a question. How about citizenship?
Excuse me?
How about citizenship?
Well, we used to have that. It was called current events, and we also had history. We don't seem to have that in schools anymore. That's why
the founding vision of education was about citizenship, that it should be developing citizens who are contributors to the society.
Yeah. Oh, I think he hung up. Yeah, and I know what you're saying. I think he was. I think the Common Core, that whole discussion is more for the public schools than for the college level.
Yes.
It sounds like to me, but I think it's the same. There is a common element though, and that is that here's one thing I wanted to point out. I mean, we've only got like a minute left, but when we discuss things on the air about the college part of education, the upper education, unless there's a college in the studio representing their college, and this does happen, but for the most part, everybody's only arguing about the cost, the money.
Right. There's a narrow focus on money and debt, and those are important issues. But this issue of what is the purpose of education, that's really the central question.
That is a very brilliant question to ask. Democracy's Education is the book. Harry C. Boyte is one of the essayists as well as the editor of the whole book. How do we get the book?
Well, you can get it on Amazon or at your local bookstore. You can order it.
Okay. Harry, where are you? Where are you calling from?
This is from Minnesota. I'm in St. Paul.
Okay. Well, thank you for getting up early to be with us, Harry. And,
Thank you, Larry.
And I love what you were saying. I think you're making a great difference, and we'll probably see changes from this book.
Okay.
Thank you, Harry. We'll be right back.
Bye.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. The Attorney General speaks out this morning on the decision to carry out a Justice Department probe into the entire Baltimore Police Department. Speaking yesterday,
Attorney General Loretta Lynch says when police departments are accused of wrongdoing,
the Department of Justice has a responsibility to examine the evidence and, if necessary, to help them implement change.
Testifying on Capitol Hill yesterday, Lynch said she met with leaders in Baltimore and is listening to their concerns in the aftermath of the death of Freddie Gray.
Fox Radio's Rachel Sutherland. Our economy created 223,000 jobs in April, on target with expectations.
The unemployment rate also fell to 5.4%, also as expected, and that's the lowest rate since May 2008.
Fox Business Network's Peter Barnes. And forecasters warn of more possible storms that could trigger tornadoes across parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Overturned truck, freeway construction, rubberneckers slowing everything down. I travel for work. News like that used to ruin my whole day until I discovered Citrix GoToMeeting. With GoToMeeting, you can meet from anywhere using your computer, tablet, or smartphone. No expensive travel required. And with HD video, simply turn on your webcam and it's like being in the same room, which means you can stay productive no matter how bad the traffic gets.
Visit GoToMeeting.com and start our free 30-day trial.
Every business trip starts with a choice. Stay or go. You can press send or press palms. Start a chat room or chat in an actual room. Just remember, this country wasn't built by folks waiting for opportunities to come to them. They went to their people and things got done. And if you're one of those business people, there's a range of choice hotels like Comfort Inn for every type of business trip.
Should I stay or should I go?
You always have a choice. Book now at choicehotels.com.
Today in Florida Ag News from a Southeast AgNet, it was announced Tuesday that an investment of up to $235 million have been made through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And Thursday, USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service Associate Chief for Conservation, Leonard Jordan, was here in the Southeast for a signing ceremony for a multi-state, nationally funded regional conservation partnership. At the event, held in Columbus, Georgia, Jordan talked about this year's RCPP and future program details.
There are various funds, each state has a level of funding that they can have to invite those within their states, but then it doesn't have to be state center. I mean, it could comprise of multiple states, but we have the national pool, and we have another pool called the critical conservation areas, and in most cases, most of those will consist of more than one state. It could be, geographical area within a state, but it does include more than one state, and that's the unique thing about it. It's looking at the geographical area and looking at the resource concerns within those areas more than just the state boundaries.
And Jordan specifically talked